Falco Pacific's a relatively young company. We've been working on the project I'll presenting today 8 months. So it's a relatively new thing for us, and what I'd like to do is go through sort of the early stages of what we did at the Horn 5 deposit and where we are today and where we hope to go with this thing. You know, the curious title when you see a new discovery 80 years in the making will set the record straight. We didn't find or discover Horn 5. LaRhonda did in about 1935. And in the better part of 40 years, they spent a tremendous amount of effort in both development and exploration in trying to get this thing into production. And you know, as most companies, you know, things change, people move on. The database got shelved and stored in the archives and pretty much forgotten over the years. It's, you know, so basically the story about this is data mining an old database and finding an opportunity. So what we have, our new discovery is in fact creating a new opportunity, we think. And I'd like to go over some of that today with you. Of course, there'll be a few forward-looking statements like most talks, so we'll flash that up for people behind the co-founders and officers and directors of Falco Pacific. I mean, you'll probably recognize a few of the names. Everyone's been around for a while, both on the technical side and on the financial side. As in most companies, you know, we're pretty good at some things, but not great at a lot of things. So we're fortunate enough to have been able to augment our team with I think, a real top-notch group of technical advisors. In terms of who's there to oversee our engineering aspects, we recently retained services of Paul Henry Girard, and you can see he was rather formative in the early development of Agnico Eagle. So he's you know, working with us, and he's going to oversee all sorts of engineering studies and questions and roadblocks that we may come up against. And of course, there's Harold Gibson, Howard Polson, and Jim Franklin, who give us that technical understanding not only of the camp, but of VMS systems worldwide, because this is a gold-rich VMS system that we're talking about today. Quick slide showing our share structure and major shareholders. A few names up there that I think everyone will know. Our outstanding shares a little over 70 million. Got cash about 7 million. We envision that, you know, in the next 12 months we'll need to spend about $2 million. So we're to get to the next phase with Horn 5. So we're okay on the cash front, and we'll be able to advance this thing along those timelines. Where are we located? Well, it's the LaRhonda camp, and I think most people probably know where that is. But we sit in the central portion of the southern Abitibi, and it's obviously a rather prolific place to reside. Zooming in a little closer, our ground position lies inside this box, so the neighborhood's pretty well populated too, with producers in both base metal and gold. Our land position is outlined in green here. It's rather substantial. We own 100% of 728 square kilometers, or about 70% of the LaRhonda mining camp. 14 former producers, obviously the Horn and the Q Mountain, Waite and the Delbridge are the largest in the lot, and there's the Joliet, some smaller producers. An extensive data archive, what does that mean? That means we own LaRhonda's entire database that they accumulated over 80 years, from 1924 right up till the last days that they were collecting data. That's all been maintained by one company over an 80-year time span in one storage facility, and it's all 100% intact and great shape. So that was something that we didn't know when we got into this, but we soon found out. And obviously when you're working in this part of Quebec, you know about the great infrastructure, great province to work in, so I won't belabor that too much. There we go. Is that the right one? When we first acquired these assets, it's rather substantial when you looked at the property package and all the, you know, the abundance of former producers, all that database. Also, I forgot to mention, is hundreds of thousands of meters of core that LaRhonda had and that we had to take out. A lot of it not even sampled. So there's an entire programs that we can do. It's almost like when we used to have the provincial core farms and everyone would go sample. But we have our own core farm now, and we've consolidated that just outside Rouen-LaRhonda. But when we looked at this thing, you know, the thing that excited me most about this is the LaRhonda camp produced about 19 million ounces of gold, mostly as a byproduct of base metal mining. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it was a gold camp, almost the same historical production is Kirkland Lake just down the road. So that's an opportunity. If you're a geologist and you can say you can have 70% of this camp and it's never been really explored hard for gold, that's an opportunity. So, you know, I like that. You know, as a geologist, that's a challenge. Let's go see what we can make of it. And like most people, you know, where are you going to start? Well, let's start near the biggest thing, right? Horn. And Horn had obviously a long history, produced a tremendous amount of metals, was pretty much a gold mine with an average grade of 6.1 grams gold and 2.2% copper. But it sat obviously right next to Qmont, which we control as well. So I threw a little, you know, circle here with a diameter of 1.5 kilometers, and there's 14 million ounces of historical production there. We're not counting the billions of pounds of copper, zinc, and the millions of ounces of silver that were produced in that little chunk of real estate. So, you know, that's a good place to start because we were looking at mining at the Horn. I mean, it was 1923 to 1976. So when they were mining the early days at the Horn mine, you could see historical production records of mining stuff that was 7% copper, 5 ounces per ton gold. So at that time, you know, you're thinking when they're mining the shallower parts of the G ore body or upper H, that probably they weren't too concerned with finding the lower grade margins of this thing and exploiting those where we would be today. So we wanted to go back and look at this thing for remnants. And just an interesting historical aside, because a lot of people would say, well, what do you hope to find right around the Horn mine? You know, I'm sure they did their homework and they did a really good job. Horn was discovered in 1923, Qmont in 1945. It took them 23 years to find this ore body about 500 meters north of this one. So there is you know, our industry's kind of weird because sometimes things can be hidden for quite some time. So, you know, we're hoping lightning strikes twice in this portfolio, and I think this is a good place to start. When we first got busy and looking at digging up data about Horn, we kept, you know, in the literature and in some of the internal documents, we heard about this deposit called Horn 5, 160 million ton deposit, 180 million ton deposit. Low grade, but, you know, something that had never really been exploited. So we were intrigued by that, obviously, as a junior, and you start seeing something that you don't know anything about. So the Horn 5 deposit is outlined in red here. The upper H and lower H sit here. We just threw them over to the side here so you can show the size comparison. So 54 million tons was mined there, and that was the birth of LaRhonda right there, and pretty much that part of Quebec. So we scoured and tried to dig up as much records as we could. We came up with an initial historic resource, non-compliant and the like, just under 170 million tons, low grade, right? But what really got us going was LaRhonda had recorded some internal higher grade chutes that had decent grades and both silver and gold. So we thought, well, there's our opportunity. Let's really, you know, take a look at this thing, see if we can recreate those high grade chutes if there's great continuity. Right? Maybe we'll get a chance to build something here. Some historic intersections at depth. These were taken from the lower levels of Horn 5. So it's open at depth, obviously. They never chased it down, but you might wonder, how deep did they chase it? That's 2.4 kilometers. LaRhonda developed this thing down to 2.4 kilometers. Over 55 kilometers of underground development, over 11,000 drill holes we have in our database of the Horn 5 and all around the Horn, everything, and it's all been entered now. So that's what we're generating in terms of our block model. So we'll be able to look at all facets of what happened here. More importantly, we for the first time ever, have created a 3D model, both geology and a resource model, for the Horn system. And I'll show you some metal zonation diagrams today. And that's something that no one's ever demonstrated before at the Horn deposit, let alone Horn 5. So there's all sorts of neat things we can do. So yeah, we found an old database. We employed modern techniques to help us understand it and build it. We surrounded ourselves with people who are smarter than ourselves, and then we'll try to take this thing and really return some value for shareholders. Well, when we got this, you know, we started going into the archives at LaRhonda, and the boys were pulling back drill logs from 1924 to 1976, complete. Surveyor notebooks with the original surveyors with the original survey plugs for the entire mine, both the Horn and the Horn 5. So we were able to recreate this entire infrastructure better than any other deposit that I've modeled, and I've modeled a few like Colmac and Lakeshore's mine and the Falco Burgess mine, but this is the most complete I've ever seen historically. Like LaRhonda did an unbelievable job, really. I can't give them enough credit for giving us something really nice to play with. So in that first modeling that we did, we sourced about 1,000 level plans and sections. Nothing came digitally; it was all hard copy. So everything I'm talking about today, we had to modernize. In this initial resource, we'll have 4,400 drill holes, or over 300,000 meters, 150,000 drill core assays. So the first part for our QP was to validate. So they went and spent great efforts in validating everything that you see here, to the point that they came to us and said, you know, this data is better than a lot of the data that we're currently seeing from new programs today. So LaRhonda really, knew what they were doing. Once we got to that stage, and we started seeing that we could create a model, a complete model, not a model where you had really good detail here, but crappy detail there because we're missing all sorts of maps and sections that got burnt or filed wrong. We have a complete coverage of the entire mine. So we made the leap to, let's spend the money to generate a 3D geological model, a resource block model. Let's see if we can get that to a 43101 compliance resource. And yeah, we did. So in 8 months, we went from stumbling around in the archives at LaRhonda to finding this, to modernizing all the data, to getting a 43101 resource out in the first quarter here in 8 months and under $500,000. And we won't require any validation drilling in the entire, because of the quality of data, and I'll show you why. Just sort of the infrastructure that LaRhonda built, we're just showing here would be the upper and lower H, and then of course the development that they did around the Horn 5, and just a summary of sort of the scale of work that LaRhonda did at this time. This outlines Horn 5, so that's your 4,400 drill holes. So I'm going to, on the next slide, we'll see a zoom in so you can get a feel for the incredible amount of work they did. It's kind of mind-numbing when you see it. Each one of these little lines is a drill hole. They drilled at 50-meter spacings throughout the entire thing that we're doing a resource on. So this infrastructure here would be the lower H. That's why it's not populated with holes. We've just started doing that now. So our resource will contain this plus stuff deeper into the mine. But from every drill station, they pinwheeled their drills, right? We have all that data, all the assays. They assayed for everything except silver, and the only assaying they did for silver is deeper in the mines, and I'll show you some of the areas of that. So we'll have to recreate silver using some bulk sampling that they did, and we'll hope to be able to get that into some, maybe this resource or a future one. Yes, the usual modeling inside a GEMCOM or whatever platform you're using. Just showing you the sort of the detail, and that's the stope outline on the lower H. You can see the sublevels and cross cuts, and it's incredibly detailed information that we got from. Now, before I go any further, like talking about that great detail, it was all InvestmentPitch out of Val-d'Or, who were the consultants who, I have to give a tremendous amount of credit for the speed at which this was done, the accuracy which was done, and the easiness that it is to cooperate with them. They've got a complete team of geological technicians, geologists with experience in the camp, as well as engineering expertise, and so we draw on it all. So what did we do when we initially started to get the data into the database? Well, like geologists, like I told some people, it's like a kid at Christmas. He doesn't read the instructions. When he gets his toy, he just rips it apart, right? So we basically took this thing and wanted to get the numbers and get it into a model quickly, a real coarse way, so we could see is there any value in just pursuing this thing, right? So we digitized initially LaRhonda's outline of what they termed their mineralized envelope, or for want of a better word, the actual Horn 5 outline. And then just to give you some dimensions, it spans from vertical extent or a depth extent of 1.5 kilometers, strike length of about 1 kilometer, and it pinches and swells over its entire extent from anywhere from 30 to 120 meters. And that would be down to 2.4 kilometers. We then took our drill hole database and re-established this boundary and actually added about another 20% to that mineralized envelope. So now we wanted to see, okay, well, they'd mentioned high-grade internal chutes. What do they look like? Are they real? What can we do with them? So we began doing that, trying to model out higher grade domains. We identified 5 domains. You're looking at a vertical extent of about 1.2 kilometers. Strike extent's about the same. So where would this thing sit in our model? Roughly in the guts of it here with the horn upper and lower H above. This is the geological model as it currently stands. It's being developed beyond this, but this is where we are. To the extent, you got the Horn Creek Fault, andesite fault, diabase dikes that cut it, and of course a cyanite porphyry and all the infrastructure in there. So when we did the initial work, we said let's just quickly do a block model in GEMCOM, and no geostats. Just give us let's just look at raw data, and see if we can confirm what LaRhonda was trying to tell us in their database. So this is all historical data. There's nothing that we've done new here. And you can quickly see there's the outline of the mineralized envelope. This is just gold grades, but you can see an area that's down here that's rather high in gold, almost similar to the base of the lower H. You may argue that LaRhonda probably found what they were looking for at about 1.5 kilometers depth, but didn't really get a chance to completely explore this entity. And we'll walk through the copper distribution inside this thing, roughly sticking to the eastern flanks of the shell. But again, that zone enriched as it is up in the base of the lower H. Look at zinc, and zinc's on the other side, but it's still enriched down there. If we throw all 3 on, there's your metal zonation at Horn, where you've got gold and copper following the east side of this structure, and zinc on the alternate side. And even if you look at this internal high-grade domain here, it still has the same zonation pattern as the larger envelope. This is, as I said, the first time we've demonstrated zonation at this thing. We are still in a preliminary, early stage. As I said, it's taken 8 months to get here, so we're still playing with the data and we're still refining it. But we see enough that, there's some things here that we can use as an exploration guideline to help us work things out. One of the things that came quickly to the forefront was using the copper over copper plus zinc ratio that was developed by Falconbridge Copper at Mellenbach. I think it was Mike Nucky and Dave Comba who did a lot of that early work. Anyways, I sat down with Harold Gibson. He said, Mike, you gotta get this thing going on this thing. Let's see what she looks like. So we did it, and the theory behind it basically is it just identifies the high temperature components of the system, or possible vent locations where the feeders came through the system. So you can see some hot spots all throughout the system. We did a little section here in this area here where you can see sort of if this were the seafloor, maybe the mound would look like that, and your exploration vectors would be this way and this way. Early yet, we haven't refined anything, but now we can see the value outside of just doing a resource model. But this is a bona fide exploration model, and we're not even talking about the Horn and what's up there. What else do we see for an exploration? There's a tremendous number of drill holes that LaRhonda drilled off lower levels of the mine, and they didn't get into the resource. We didn't have the density. So that's our opportunity at depth. Also, when you turn this thing sideways and look on it from 90 degrees, you can see that there's an on-echelon stack nature to the deposit. That's never been shown or demonstrated ever before that I know of. And then what it tells me is, look at the predictability of following this thing to depth and the fact that it's not offset greatly. So again, early stuff, but this is where we sit down with the complete model with our advisors and start, getting them to help us understand what may be happening here more and help us develop more exploration strategies behind this. So where are we now? We've pretty much coming to the end of doing this. That gave us enough confidence that, it's worthwhile looking at modeling the Horn, upper and lower H. Added 6,600 additional drill holes and 3,000 PDF files. 6,600 drill holes have now been populated into this model. This is the original 4,400 holes that we use in the resource. These holes are at 0 elevation. They just have you have to digitize them off hard copy, so we move about 100 a day of these into the main body of the project. So by the time we're doing this talk, all these holes will be back up in here. So what does this give us? It gives us the fact that this thing's been drilled off and we can test exploration targets without putting a drill on site. We can look at some of the vectors that we may be able to develop out of these models, then glean through the database, see if we did intersect string or zone mineralization or whatever, and begin to work that way. So really you have an enviable platform of having an exploration company that really doesn't have to spend a lot of dollars on through the drilling phase of anything. We've got this tremendous cache of data, and keep in mind this represents a very small portion of the entire land package that we're working on, and we don't have the time to go through all the other targets, but this one's quite substantial in its own right. What does it look like in a vertical scale compared to LaRhonda? Pretty good. That's where she sits. LaRhonda are actively mining a lot deeper than that and exploring down to over 3,000 meters. So we're still, this is about 35 kilometers away, so we're not out of the ballpark of reality here of mining something like this. And at the high grade at depth might be something of interest to people too, looking for the, that this thing could be, could be recreating a new sort of horn proper zone at depth. That's it.
Oh, good.
We're done.
Oh, there we go.